You and I can see how empty wealth really is. Richard Ashford slid a single piece of paper across the cold marble table. 5 wealthy names, 5 massive fortunes, 5 elite men he chose to secure his family empire by Friday. Marry one or her brother gets the inheritance. But Sienna refused to touch that transactional paper. She walked out of the cold dining hall, down the grand staircase, past the wine cellar, straight to the dusty boiler room. A man in a worn work jacket knelt by the furnace. One greasy hand held a wrench with quiet, honest certainty. He did not even look up when she entered. She looked down at her father's list, then quietly studied him. A real man absent from her father's transactional list. The basement smelled of iron and dust. Sienna lingered near the doorway, watching this devoted father working with quiet dedication. No mindless humming, no angry swearing. He never even looked at his phone. He simply listened to the massive furnace like a doctor checking a patient's heartbeat. "It has been making a sound," she said. "I know." He never broke focus. His voice was deep, built for quiet spaces. "The pressure valve is fine," he added. "Your relief line is iced over. The last technician skipped the bleed cycle entirely. I will fix it tonight." Sienna stepped closer. She was raised in this empty estate. No one had ever spoken about her home with such a grounded, honest voice. The hired workers in these expensive halls usually brought fake worries and high price tags, showing the greedy calculation of people who only valued money. But this quiet man never looked at her designer shoes. "What is your name?" "Ethan." "Ethan what?" "Carter." He kept his back turned. He set aside a smaller tool and carefully chose another one. His hands worked the brass fittings with a care no typical hired worker showed. Slowly, deliberately, like he was nurturing something rather than just fixing cold pipes. "You do not ask who I am," she noted. "You entered a basement at 7 p.m. wearing cashmere. I assume you live upstairs. Most people try to guess my name." "I do not guess, I fix things," she nearly laughed aloud. Instead, she watched him secure the line, check the pressure with bare fingers, and listen. He closed his eyes briefly. It was exactly like a master musician listening closely for a note out of tune. The giant furnace settled. It let out a long, quiet hum of relief. "Done," he muttered, standing up with stiff knees. He stood much taller than she expected, lean and quietly strong. Carefully, he folded his greasy rag, packed his tools into a battered box, and snapped it shut. "Let us pause here." Beside his tools sat a child's worn-out lunchbox next to some folded construction paper. Bright crayon drawings of a house, a son, and a happy family. Sienna noticed his true wealth. She skipped the personal questions. "How long have you been working in this house?" she asked. 3 weeks. I move around the contractor list doing odd jobs in various buildings." He gently pipped the faded lunch tin and his child's drawing. He slipped them into his pocket with the same quiet care he gave to his honest work. Pulling a small notebook from his pocket, he wrote 3 quick notes with a pencil. He tore the page out, placing it carefully on the bench next to the furnace. Helpful maintenance notes, she realized, left for the next worker. You see, real integrity means doing the job right, quietly protecting those who come after you. A shadow moved past the hallway just behind her. Margaret Pierce, their longtime housekeeper, stopped at the doorway and looked into the dim room. I caught Margaret's cold stare for a split second. No hello, not even a nod. She ignored me and kept walking. Sienna watched her go. "Margaret knows you," she murmured. "Everyone knows the help," I shrugged. She didn't say hi. Wealthy folk rarely see real people. I walked right past Sienna, keeping my distance from her high-priced designer jacket. At the door I paused. I turned slightly to give her some honest, free advice. "That valve will survive this winter, but after that, replace the whole thing. Do it right. Don't let cheap contractors just put another temporary bandage on it." "Why care?" she asked. "Because nobody else around here does." I walked out. My work boots clicked on the stone, calm, steady until I pulled the heavy exit shut. I left her standing alone in the quiet, dusty heat of that boiler room. She was still clutching that list, 5 wealthy suitors her father picked to buy his empire. But believe me, those rich names faded. She only saw a working man who didn't care about her money. The next evening, she trapped me in the back hallway just as my shift ended. The air smelled of damp wool. I was already holding my heavy toolbox, ready to go home. "Mr. Carter, wait." I stopped in my tracks, no sigh, just stood there waiting. "I have a proposal," she said, "purely business, not personal. A 6-month paper marriage. You just attend 3 elite corporate dinners with me, and I will put $200,000 into your bank account immediately, plus full college tuition for your little girl, secured in a trust until she is 18. My expression didn't change. Did Margaret tell you about my kid? I asked quietly. I had to ask. You pried into a stranger's child for a deal. I asked a lifelong family friend about the man I am considering marrying. I see. I looked at her then, really looked. You know that feeling. Under those harsh lights, she realized someone was finally seeing past her wealth, reading her soul clearly. No, but you do not know the terms. I know enough. My answer is no. Mr. Carter, my daughter is not a transaction in your business ledger. Her life is not a chip you play to please your billionaire father. Your money means nothing to me. I will not sell my fatherhood to buy her future. My voice stayed perfectly calm. That is what shook her. I talked to her just like I talk to any broken cold machine. Good night, Miss Ashford. I walked off, never needing to slam a door to prove a point. I closed it softly, with the absolute certainty of a protective father who knew his family's peace was priceless. I left Sienna standing all alone in the hallway. Sure, she had faced business losses, bad weather, or cold rejections from her billionaire father before. But you and I know she had never faced a man who valued his family over her millions. Every rich person she knew only wanted assets, land, insider secrets, or her famous last name. But this working-class father didn't want a single cent of her corrupted family fortune. She wasn't insulted. For the first time, she just felt genuinely curious. Later, I heard her phone rang near 11 p.m. It was Margaret, who never called her. In 31 years, the old woman had never once dialed Sienna's private cell phone. Sienna answered instantly. "It is an emergency," Margaret cried out, her voice trembling. "Mr. Carter's little girl is in danger. They just rushed her to the hospital." "Why tell me?" Sienna asked. "Because you need to know," Margaret said. Sienna was sprinting to her car before she even got her winter coat on. She didn't stop to think why a stranger's child mattered so much to her. The glowing harbor lights blurred across her wet windshield. She drove too fast. We know true strength is quiet, built on protecting family, but her tires screamed toward that red emergency sign. These pale hospital hallways strip away all illusions of wealth. Ethan was there. A real father with nothing to prove does not panic, holding the desk as if protecting his entire world. He spotted her. In a split second, his face flashed 3 protective emotions, and none of them welcomed her wealthy world. "Why are you here?" "I showed up to apologize for earlier." "Now is not the time. I'm not staying. I just needed you to know I actually heard you." A nurse leaned over the station counter. "Mr. Carter, she's stable. You can go in 10 minutes." That word, stable, brought a father the only relief money could never buy. The tension cracked. As he let go, Sienna saw the true weight of a father's protective love. She sat silently on a cheap plastic chair, leaving her father's wealthy empire far behind. They waited through those grueling hours, divided by status but quiet in the presence of real crisis. He kept his silent vigil, and she respected his quiet devotion. A janitor quietly mopped the hallway at 3 in the morning, performing his humble duty. Cheap ceiling lights buzzed on a low frequency, a hum that stripped away all pretense. Across the hall, a grieving mother wept softly, reminding us that money cannot buy a family's safety. Nobody asked why. At 4:15, a nurse finally ushered them inside. Ethan rushed to his daughter, while Sienna stayed seated, knowing she was not family. 20 minutes later, the nurse returned. "He's asking if you'll come inside." Sienna slowly stood. She felt a sudden urge to fix her hair, feeling small without her wealthy armor. But she stopped. The hospital room was tiny. A fragile little child lay beneath sterile sheets with an IV taped to her tiny, precious hand. Ethan sat on the mattress, standing guard over his family. Look closely. He held her hand like a father protecting the only asset that actually matters. The young girl opened her exhausted blue eyes, staring quietly at Sienna for a long, solemn moment. "You have hair like a fairy," the child whispered. Sienna let out a laugh before she could stop herself. The sound was raw and shocked, as if her wealthy throat had forgotten how to feel joy. She had not laughed in 7 weeks, forgetting what real happiness felt like outside of money. "What's your name?" she asked. "Hazel. My middle name is Sienna. That's a color." "Sure is." Hazel cracked a fragile smile, then let her tired eyes drift shut again. Ethan had nothing to prove to Sienna. He only cared about protecting his little girl. He stroked her hand with slow care, checking she was warm. A devotion worth more than any inheritance. Sienna quietly sat in the chair parked near the window. On the table sat a worn paperback of bedtime stories left behind by another caring family. She opened it and read aloud, sharing a simple, comforting tale about a fox under a bridge. Hazel drifted asleep while Ethan listened in peaceful, appreciative silence. At 6, the nurse checked the IV and Ethan quietly led Sienna back outside. The hospital was waking up as supply carts started rolling. A cheap coffee machine sputtered to life in the lounge. "Thank you," he murmured. For what? For reading to her, for not asking questions. Sienna just studied him. Under the harsh glare, his face showed grit born of protecting family, not corporate warfare. "I'm definitely not making that same ridiculous offer again," she told him. "Not the one from yesterday." "Good. I'm making a totally different one." He stood steady and waited. "Give me an honest reason to do this, not a fake contract. Something I can tell my billionaire father with real conviction. Tell me right to his face that you're genuinely part of my life. Give me 1 month. After that, if it falls apart, we end it. No money, no trust funds, no paperwork at all." "Why would I agree?" I asked. "Because you know how this ends for your family if I lose. My father's chosen groom is the same heartless businessman who destroyed your old line of work. My wealth and boardroom power can't protect my family anymore. I need a true protector he can't ignore. He'll dismiss me in 5 seconds," I said. "He won't. He only values money, so he'll completely underestimate your strength." I peered through the glass at my sleeping daughter, the only wealth that ever mattered. I stood in silence, listening to her monitor. I had to protect her. I nodded. For my child, I'd do anything. Friday arrived far too quickly. I arrived at their cold, expensive mansion in an old suit from another decade. My jacket was neatly pressed, my old shoes polished, dignity over raw wealth. Holding Hazel's hand tight, I guided her forward. In her simple navy dress, she stared at their massive, sterile mansion like a museum. Richard, the cold billionaire, met us in the hall. His harsh eyes judged me instantly, measuring my worth by my cheap leather shoes. His expression was frozen, but his jaw twitched with pure disdain. "Mr. Carter, sit down." "And the child?" "My daughter, Hazel." The billionaire didn't even offer a nod. Hazel looked at him, then turned to me for safety, whispering politely, "Hello." Sienna descended the grand staircase, completely ignoring my hand to keep up appearances. She stepped right behind me, letting a father stand his ground. Meanwhile, the arrogant Brendan Locke waited inside the massive dining room. He was 44, broad-shouldered, wore a smug smile, and clearly valued money over real character. He stood tall as we entered the room. He forced a hard handshake, trying to assert dominance over a working father. "Brendan Locke, Chief Operating Officer," he sneered. "And what exactly do you do, Ethan?" "Building maintenance. Hourly. Contract. How much do you actually make?" He smirked. The massive dining room went silent. I noticed Sienna tightly grip her high-back chair. I stood tall. 42,000 a year, with full health coverage to protect my daughter. Brendan let out a mocking, cruel laugh. "Well, at least you're honest." Dinner began. My precious daughter sat safely nestled right between me and Sienna. My daughter showed her beautiful manners, politely thanking the staff with every single dish. She tried ignoring the grand cold crystal chandelier, though her innocent eyes peeked twice. Without even looking, I gently reached over to adjust the napkin on her lap. It was pure fatherly instinct. Sienna watched my devotion to my child. During the main course, my sweet girl reached for her juice and accidentally knocked the glass. Dark juice spread over the clean linen, dripping down right onto Brendan's expensive suit sleeve. Brendan leaped up in anger. "I am so sorry," my frightened little girl whispered, her face turning bright red. I was instantly on my knees, gently pulling her sleeve away from the spill. I took my cloth napkin and quietly folded it over once. Then I tenderly blotted the small splash of juice from her soft wrist. "It's fine, baby, just a little spill, I've got you." My voice stayed steady. I ignored the angry man looming above. Only my child's safety mattered. "It is just a sleeve, a piece of fabric," Sienna said, silencing everyone. Sienna spoke quietly, remaining seated. She knew what really held true value. Her voice was calm and final, matching her father's authority. She stared straight into his cold eyes, defending the child. The patriarch slowly set down his glass, facing his defiant, protective daughter. Then he looked at me, a father kneeling to shield his beloved child. You and I know true value doesn't need millions. I watched that cold billionaire glare at Brendan, who sat there desperately polishing his empty status. Mr. Carter, Richard snapped, 1 month. Prove you actually have something worthy of my daughter, or leave this mansion forever. I didn't flinch, his wealth was entirely worthless to me. Are we clear? Yes, sit good. Richard raised his expensive crystal glass to clarity, but no one else raised a glass. The next morning, Sienna chose love and packed her bags. By evening, she was hauling them up the narrow stairs to our warm, humble Hanover Street bakery. My little apartment was humble but built on love, 2 bedrooms, 1 alley window. Another faced the street, with a tiny kitchen far smaller than her father's massive closets. Yet, it was always filled with the comforting warmth of fresh sourdough. My sweet Hazel proudly showed off our home, the bathroom light, the tricky hot tap, and her beloved bandage cabinet. She took caring for others incredibly seriously. Daddy says we always protect our family, my girl explained, lining up 3 boxes by size. You never know when someone you love gets hurt. That seems wise, it is. That first night I watched Sienna stand at our sink, carefully washing our 3 simple plates. I could tell she had never known chores before. She stared at her hands in the warm water, discovering a new kind of magic. The cheap soap smelled of lemon, and the worn dish towel was one I had folded 1,000 times. I made a simple pasta dinner, nothing fancy, just home-cooked food made with real love and care. 3 plates under our single warm lamp, with Hazel giggling right between us. We ate quietly. Hazel happily hummed while I poured our water. Sienna ate slowly. You and I know that look, when someone finally realizes that true belonging cannot be bought. Later, Hazel grabbed her crayon tin, sliding a blank page between them to share. You draw the sky, she instructed Sienna. I will draw our family, don't worry, anyone can draw a sky. Just blue on top, white in the middle, and pink at the bottom for a sunset. Sienna held the cheap crayon, her hand trembling just a bit. She drew a clumsy blue stripe, but Hazel nodded, completely happy with her effort. Watching from the sink, I felt my heart swell with a quiet, protective pride. Sienna caught me looking but said nothing, silently drawing a second blue stripe. Now the white, Hazel said. Press gently, that is our rule. I didn't know there were rules, always rules to keep us safe. Daddy says so. I smiled silently at the sink, listening as Sienna carefully pressed the crayon down. The colors blended, shaping a simple, beautiful sky they had made together. My sweet girl gently placed her tiny hand over Sienna's, guiding the crayon before letting go. A pure, simple act of connection. Sienna completely froze, feeling the warmth of true belonging. Later, after Hazel fell asleep, Sienna searched our old hallway closet for an extra blanket. High behind a stack of worn towels, her fingers brushed against my old metal lockbox. She pulled down my dented engineering file case, worn and secured by a simple latch. She popped the lock open right in the hallway. Inside lay patents, schematics, and reports bearing an official seal. Every page carried the same title, E. Carter, Principal Engineer of Geothermal Systems. Dated years ago, before I chose to walk away from status and protect the family I love. You and I know real power doesn't wear a suit. She realized her quiet neighbor was much more than just a maintenance worker. She returned the files exactly the way she found them. She folded the towels, went to bed, and guarded his family's quiet secret. The next morning, hollow corporate power echoed through the family's massive tower. Brendan Locke stood over the archivist's desk, clutching a highly guarded corporate folder. Pull every single file on Ethan Carter from the engineering division. He resigned 3 years ago. Which project? The geothermal initiative. The cancelled one. The director hesitated. Those files are sealed. By who? By you, sir. Brendan smirked with cold arrogance. Then open it up. Before 5 today. Keep it offline. Print those documents and bring them to my office. Nobody else. Are we clear? Yes, sir. The director left, leaving Brendan staring out the window. Down below, a massive cargo ship slowly glided into the gray harbor. Panicking, he grabbed his phone. Westcott, move the timeline up right now. Have your team announce our massive corporate merger this Friday. 3 days later, while that devoted father drove his daughter to school, Sienna cornered Margaret. Tell me about him. The wise housekeeper knew exactly who she was talking about. Dropping her towel, she sighed. He used to work for your wealthy father. He designed the entire clean energy project, the one meant to free your family's empire from dirty oil. but they shut it down 3 years ago, claiming his data was completely useless. They cut the funding, valuing family over corporate greed. He quietly resigned. And his wife? Margaret looked out the window, lost in a heavy, painful silence. She was driving to meet him after that awful meeting. A huge truck lost control. On a rainy night, he pulled little Hazel from that crushed car with his own hands. She was only 4 years old. Heartbroken, Sienna sat down, unable to find any words. Margaret handed her some tea. So why did they really kill his life's work? That isn't my story to share, the old housekeeper said, letting out a heavy sigh. She walked to a hidden drawer, where she'd kept her private things safe since Sienna was 9. Pulling out a faded, folded sheet of paper, she whispered, "I kept this safe. But I shouldn't have. It was the signature page that killed his project." She placed the devastating truth right in front of her. The main signature didn't belong to the wealthy billionaire, Richard Ashford. It was Brendan Locke. You and I know how greed destroys families, and Sienna could only stare in shock. Outside, the gardener kept working, slowly raking the grass of the massive estate. The soft sound drifted through the open window, utterly detached from the family drama inside. Does my billionaire father know? He blindly signs 40 different documents every single day. He trusted Brendan completely with those tech assets, never once checking the fine print. Why keep quiet? Because I'm just the housekeeper, but mostly because Mr. Carter begged me not to. He chose his child's peace over that corporate project. He knew corporate success meant nothing compared to loving and protecting his little girl. He wanted his family kept far away from this greedy empire, until tonight. Sienna folded the paper with shaking hands, slipping the proof into her coat pocket. That night she sat across from the devoted father in his tiny kitchen. His daughter slept. The streets were quiet and the bakery downstairs was dark. She whispered, "I know everything." The humble man understood immediately without making any excuses. "How much?" he asked. "Almost everything." "The project, your wife, we see what truly matters now." Looking down, he whispered, "I buried it on purpose." Ever walk away from power? I didn't want that life. I just wanted to protect Hazel and fix furnaces. "I'm not stepping foot in that building again," I said. "I'm not asking you to," she promised. "Then why tell me this?" I asked. "Because you need to know who is behind it." Sienna set the folded paper down. I saw the name written there, and for a long moment I froze. My fist clenched on the table, then slowly relaxed. Violence would not protect the people I loved tonight. Then Hazel's bedroom door creaked open. My sweet girl shuffled out in her pajamas, warm and sleepy, walking right over to Sienna without a second thought. "Good night, my Sienna," Hazel whispered, wrapping her small, delicate arms tightly around Sienna's neck. Sienna closed her eyes. I stood in the doorway, watching the only family bond that mattered. I kept my face totally unreadable. Tears welled in my eyes for the first time in 3 years, but I didn't wipe them. Across town, inside the cold Ashford Holdings boardroom that afternoon, Brendan stood at the long table, clicking through slick slides that practically shouted arrogant confidence. The room was packed with 12 corporate directors, 3 silent observers, and a junior counsel scribbling by the door. Westcott Petroleum brings $4 billion in operating capital and massive distribution. They bring stability, Brendan continued. Your clean energy plan was nice. But it doesn't make financial sense. We're a business and we only owe our investors growth. We don't just owe them a headline, someone retorted. We promised the world clean energy. We committed to growth. Markets only remember growth, Sienna fired back. They forget empty promises, but this board remembers. This board, Brendan sneered, has tolerated 3 weeks of your little circus, Sienna. The sudden engagement to a simple maintenance worker. A nobody whose file is sitting right here. Brendan tossed a folder of my failures onto the table. Ethan Carter, fired engineering manager, a system-level failure on a $500 million project. Exactly the kind of man you never let near our wealthy investors. A struggling single father you definitely do not bring into this family. I asked the board if a billionaire's daughter with such poor judgment should lead this entire company. Right down the hall, the elevator doors slid open. I stepped out, holding my daughter's hand tightly. Her school backpack was still on. I had just picked her up at 3:15. Sienna promised her an office tour, and Hazel had proudly bragged about it for 2 days. We turned the corner. Picture this. Through the boardroom glass, I saw my life laid out on screen. My own name was up there. I froze, hearing the arrogant judgment Brendan passed on my life. I didn't storm inside in a rage. I didn't even step through their door. I just stood there, holding my sweet girl's hand tight to protect her. "Daddy," she whispered. "Everything is fine, sweetheart," I whispered. Inside, Sienna stood up from her chair in anger. "You won't speak about him in here again. I'll talk about whoever I want." The door clicked open. Hazel marched right in first, totally unaware that her innocent love was interrupting their business. She ran confidently across that cold corporate room. She ran straight to me, her anchor, as I quietly followed her inside. She proudly held up a folded paper. I drew us all three, see? Daddy and Sienna and me holding hands. I knelt down to her level. I gently took her masterpiece, staring at what truly mattered for one long second. I leaned forward and kissed her forehead, letting our love silence that entire corporate room. 12 directors watched me in my work coat accept a crayon drawing from my kid. Let me tell you, I held it like a deed, because loving my family is my only real wealth. Hazel pulled back from my shoulder, turning her big, serious eyes toward those wealthy, empty suits in the boardroom. "My daddy fixes things," she announced, "even when they are very broken." An older, silver-haired board member quietly set her expensive corporate pen down. She did not smile, but the warmth in her eyes showed she understood real value. Brendan opened his mouth, then shut it as the billionaire, Richard Ashford, strolled past the open door. The powerful billionaire noticed us and stopped cold, but he stayed outside our space. He stood in the hall, watching a father kneeling to protect his brave little girl. And he watched his own daughter, Sienna, standing firmly to protect us from Brendan. He finally walked away, but he saw what truly mattered. At 6 o'clock the next evening, Sienna used her grandfather's master key to slip into the archives. The desk archivist looked up, blinked once, and immediately turned away to ignore her. The family name still carried power, opening every single door inside that corporate maze. She dug out the true geothermal file, finding the raw data before they buried it. She read until midnight, discovering my original engineering tests had been completely clean. Our pilot site beat projections by 11%, demanding a full, successful rollout. But someone slipped in a fake set of test results just 3 weeks later. Doctored numbers, terrible projections, and completely forged signatures. That fake submission had been sent directly from Brendan's personal email. It was sent to a blind account tied to a rival petroleum investment firm. $16 million quietly slid into Brendan's private trust 40 days after my project was killed. Sienna printed every single page. Carrying a heavy banker's box, she strode right out of the building, ignoring the guard completely. Back at my modest apartment, she dropped that heavy corporate box onto our kitchen table. I stepped out of Hazel's bedroom in my socks, immediately spotting the heavy box. I sat down across from it, just staring at the plain cardboard for a while. I rested my hand on the lid, hesitated, and finally ripped the box open. For the first time in 3 years, I was looking at my stolen life work. My hand shook slightly as I turned the pages. I could not say a word. The bakery downstairs had closed 2 hours ago, leaving the whole apartment quiet and dark. Sienna just sat there, watching me quietly. She did not care about the papers, she was only studying my face. Halfway through that heavy binder, I found a page she had barely even noticed. They were my own rough notes, scribbled 3 long years ago. Tucked in the corner was a tiny stick figure, sketched there by a loving hand. A heart and the letter K for my late wife. I pressed my palm against it. Holding my hand there, I quietly told Sienna she used to doodle on my drafts. Whenever I brought work home, she said the dry numbers needed some love. "I didn't know," Sienna whispered. "I'm not asking you to return to that company. I am not asking you to fight my father. I only wanted you to have the truth you deserved." I looked up at her, my eyes burning with tears I refused to hide. I reached across the table and took her hand, firmly, not just a gentle hold. It was the grip of a man holding on to what truly matters in life. No words were needed, we both knew. Then her phone suddenly began to ring. "Margaret, listen closely," the older woman warned. "He's hired a private investigator to target your family. He's tracking little Hazel, checking her school schedule, following her home. He's targeting a defenseless child. Sienna, you must handle this tonight." She quietly put her phone down, ready to protect. Ethan was already standing, his face hardened with a father's protective rage. You and I know real power is protecting your own." His calm was now forged steel. This wasn't a defeated man's silence. It was the fierce quiet of a protective father. "The corporate summit is Friday," she said. "I know. Will you stand with me?" "Yes." That Friday night, 400 wealthy investors packed the Boston Harbor Hotel ballroom, chasing money. Cold crystal chandeliers, a hollow stage, rows of press cameras waiting. Ice sculptures carved with the Cold family logo sat on back tables and were already slowly melting onto the tablecloth. The billionaire Richard Ashford stood proud, valuing assets over his own family. Brendan stood nearby, flashing the arrogant smirk of someone who thought money meant victory. "Good evening," Richard started. "Tonight, Ashford Holdings announces—" "Excuse me, father." Sienna marched right up the stairs. Ethan followed her, wearing a simple suit, carrying nothing but a folder to protect those he loved. The massive room went silent. "I need 5 minutes," Sienna declared, "before you talk about money." Richard stared at his daughter, then at Ethan. He scanned the crowd, the cameras, and finally Brendan, whose smug grin remained, although his white knuckles gripped the podium in fear. Defeated, the patriarch stepped back. 5 minutes. Sienna took the stage as the giant screen behind her changed. The actual engineering data appeared, proving they had faked the numbers for corporate greed. Hidden emails, offshore accounts, and $16 million of stolen wealth. Her voice remained steady. This safety report was buried 3 years ago. A lie replaced it, and these emails prove who put that fraud into the record. Here is the account that took the bribe, hidden in a trust I had to legally subpoena to expose. The signature on the project cancellation belongs to just one executive in this room. And he is standing right on this stage. He is also the coward who hired an investigator to stalk a 7-year-old girl at school. I want that vile threat to my family on the record, too. Outrage swept the room, cameras flashed, then the protective father stepped forward. He dropped the folder on the podium, not even looking at it. "I am Ethan Carter. I ran the geothermal division here from 2019 to 2022. Our first pilot project in Western Massachusetts made 5.7 megawatts of clean power at a fraction of standard costs. The recovery systems ran reliably, hitting metrics across all 4 seasons. The technology is real. It worked then, and it works today. I am not here to trade corporate insults. I am here to protect the honest people who built this technology with their own hands." He paused for a moment, completely ignoring the greedy executive. Instead, his eyes found the third row of the quiet room, landing on 2 of his former engineers fired 3 years ago, sitting proud in cheap, borrowed suits. "You and I know that most of those honest workers aren't in this room. Some had their lives ruined. I want their names in this record, too. You will find every name in the folder on this podium." Knowing his family was safe, he stepped back. We both know that sudden silence. 400 wealthy guests realizing the genius Brendan tried to ruin had just proven his brilliant mind, laying bare a complex power system with the tender precision of a surgeon. The powerful patriarch slowly stood, walking heavily toward the edge of the stage. He seized the microphone. 3 years ago, he said, I signed a project cancellation order that I did not read in full. I trusted the man who handed it to me. I should not have, Mr. Locke is no longer employed by this company effective tonight. The Westcott merger will not proceed. Mr. Carter, on behalf of Ashford Holdings, I owe you an apology. Not because my daughter brought you here, because I should have read the file. Applause slowly rippled through the grand room, started by those who valued true work over empty wealth. The clapping grew, forcing even the most arrogant investors to stand and show respect for real talent. Security quickly arrived to escort Brendan away. He went quietly, completely broken by his own greed. He walked out with slumped shoulders, his face a mask of total and absolute defeat. Sienna locked eyes with Ethan. No words or dramatic embraces were needed. She simply reached out and tapped his shoulder, a quiet gesture of complete trust. 6 weeks later, a new morning began at the quiet neighborhood bakery downstairs. Soon, the warm, comforting scent of fresh bread filled their modest little home. In a simple white tee, Ethan stood over the stove, happily making breakfast for his family. Sienna sat close by, wrapped in his soft, faded flannel, completely at peace. With messy hair, she smiled, looking over plans for their new honest project. Nearby, little Hazel happily colored at the table, giggling as she hit a special drawing. Ethan wasn't interested in a billionaire's payroll. Instead, he founded his own clean energy startup, built on integrity and hard work. Their small warehouse office was humble, but they had a passionate, tight-knit team. 6 loyal workers had gladly walked away from corporate greed, just waiting to follow a leader they truly trusted. To them, the massive conglomerate was just another client. They had other partners too, but honestly, Ethan answered only to his own conscience and family. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. The aging billionaire stood outside in a simple coat, carrying warm bread and a small wrapped gift. "May I come in?" Sienna quietly stepped back, welcoming him into her home. The powerful tycoon sat at their cozy, crowded table, completely stripped of his usual armor. He set the bread down, nervously holding the little box, suddenly realizing his wealth meant nothing here. He offered the gift to Hazel. "I heard you like to draw." She opened it very gently. A tin of 64 brand new crayons, her eyes shone. "There is gold." "There is." She slipped off her chair, walking straight to him without any hesitation. She leaned gently against his knee, showing the innocent trust that money could never buy. The proud man looked down, his cold heart melting at her gentle touch. He rested his large, weathered hand so tenderly on her small back. He hadn't held a child since Sienna was small. "Will you show me your picture?" he asked softly. She eagerly climbed up, laying her masterpiece across his lap. A drawing of 4 stick figures, a mom, a dad, a child, and a grandfather, all holding hands as a real family. He stared at the paper, completely overwhelmed by a warmth he had ignored for decades. Quietly, he reached for a handkerchief, hiding his tears by pretending to clean his glasses. We both know who truly won here. Later, they watched the morning traffic together, secure in the family they protected. The soft morning sun shone gently down, warming their simple and beautiful new beginning. I pulled out the tiny box, placing it on the sill, "Our real wealth, right here." "This isn't about closing a deal," I whispered, keeping the box closed. "It's about starting a real family with you, Hazel, and whatever comes next. Forget corporate contracts, just a promise." Sienna stared at the box, then up at me. She did not say a single word. She just reached out, placing her warm hand over mine, choosing our family. Behind us, safe and loved, my daughter Hazel was completely focused on her drawing. She carefully sketched a 4th family member. She paused, then added a 5th shape, with 4 legs and a tail, completing our home. She looked up, seeing Sienna and me united, protecting each other by the window. Then she looked at her wealthy grandfather, sitting empty and alone beside his untouched bakery bag. He just watched the morning light, perhaps realizing his cold empire couldn't buy this warmth. Hazel drew one last figure, a tiny, white-haired grandfather, welcoming him into our family. She smiled, knowing what truly mattered.